Hello and welcome to another podcast from your good friends at Books of the Year. When I say good friends, I'm aware that we've never met.
Well, I mean, there are going to be some people listening who we have met. So,
yes,
you know, I mean,
but
we're
also,
good friends there.
It might be that some people would take against us. You know, we'd meet them in their house, or they'd come around to your house, or we'd meet, and they go, well, I don't want to be friends with you. So,
not really. Don't like your attic. It's a bit dirty.
It's a bit of a negative start to the podcast, really. And that's not the way it's supposed to. Anyway, we're very excited because Andy Weir is going to be on the show. Best-selling author of The Martian, which was, I remember years ago, Child 3, we're on holiday. Child 3 has found a copy of The Martian. I hadn't seen it before, and it was one of the self-published versions of it. And I've never seen him hooked into a book like he was hooked into The Martian.
Wow. Yeah.
And he hoovered the thing up and, went on to sell 10 million copies or something like that. But, he writes astonishing books. He's very engaging. He's along shortly. We've got some correspondence, Matt. Do you want to go first?
Yes, I will. And there was quite a lot of interest in, obviously, when we were talking about your experiences at Warwick University, and obviously Sarah Pearce as well, who was on the podcast recently. And Caton Jones says 80s music was decadence, if I remember correctly. Alison Walsh said, as a former Tossell flat occupant, I especially like this pod. Happy days. And finally, HMS Valiant says, we all enjoyed listening to Simon on raw 12:51 a.m.
Yes.
Would often delay our approach to Scapa Flow so that we could catch the last few minutes of the gossip column on Pajama Mama Rama. Pajama
Rama. This is because I did a late night show called Pajama Rama. And as I think I mentioned before, Warwick University Radio, which was at the time called W963, and it was also called Raw 12:51 a.m. We were taken off the air by the Ministry of Defence.
Yes.
Because we were audible to submarines, even though we weren't audible to the rest of the campus. So thank you to HMS Valiant. Do you think you need to surface to download a podcast?
Yes. I'm going to say if you're down in the depths of Mariana's Trench, then the Wi-Fi is going to be pretty dodgy. And certainly your data is not going to be great either. So I'm going to say you do need to service in order to get your podcasts.
We need a little bit of HMS Valiant. If you could come back to us, please, Roger 10-4. Do you have to surface in a submarine just to download the latest podcast? I'm sure that wouldn't be MOD approved. Really.
Excellent stuff, yes. And then tell us how the nuclear weapons work. That would be great as well. Thanks very much.
Yeah. So at a court-martial, you could say to the captain, why did you surface at a time of international crisis with North Korea? He said, well, because we needed to get the latest podcast from Books of the Year.
Yes, we were running out of podcasts. We just thought it would be a great idea. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Books of the Year at yahoo.com. If you'd like to email, you can tweet us at Books of the Year. Okay, now this is a very special moment because on our Books of the Year podcast, we can welcome I know he's in America, and I can see him and he's looking fit and fabulous. Hello, Andy Weir. How are you?
Hello, Simon Mayo. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
And where are you, sir?
I'm in Northern California, a small town called Saratoga. It's near San Jose, maybe an hour from San Francisco.
Okay, well, it's very nice to talk to you again. Congratulations on another blockbuster book, which is called Project Hail Mary. Matt is now going to describe the cover. Matt, have you got a copy there?
Yes, I have. Yes, and it's action cover, isn't it? We've got. I mean, it's a mainly black cover, but dominating the center of that front cover is an astronaut falling back into the sun. How more action can you get than that? Astronaut falling into the sun. And then Project Hail Mary in big silver bold letters, Andy Weir's name behind it, and then some endorsements from Ernest Cline, who of course did Ready Player One, and Tim Peake, our own astronaut. Yes, the multi-million best-selling author of The Martian.
It's a cover that's working hard for you, Andy, isn't it? I mean, it really is setting a fantastic tone. Because sometimes covers are slightly misleading, but you must be happy with this one.
Yeah, it looks great. And the U.S. cover is very similar. It's a similar theme, although for whatever reason, the planet or star or abstract object in the background is kind of yellow instead of red.
I always think, not that I've been in an American airport for a while, obviously, the British covers are somehow better than American. This isn't a flag waving thing. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but the American books, they kind of look and feel incredibly different to the UK version.
Well, I think it's that's why you let the local publisher, decide what the cover should look like, because they know how to sell books to the people in their culture, right?
Absolutely right. I think that counts as a very diplomatic answer.
Yes.
Anyway, listen, Andy, it's great to talk to you again. I've enjoyed this book very much indeed. Take us into the world, which I imagine you wrote this quite a long time ago, but take us into this extraordinary world that you've created and introduce us to Ryland Grace.
Well, I finished the book in January of 2020. So a lot of people think there's like some correlation, like some symbolism with COVID or something in the book, but there isn't, because I finished it before the pandemic really started. In this book, we follow Ryland Grace, who wakes up aboard a spacecraft with no memory of who he is, why he's there, or what he's supposed to be doing. Over time, as his memories slowly come back to him, he comes to realize he's the sole survivor on a last-ditch effort mission to save humanity from an extinction-level event. So, no pressure.
Fine. Okay. Now, if we stray too far into the explanation, I'm sure you'll just tell us to back off. So, but take us into what the problem is. It's this very striking opening, as you say. Ryland wakes up. He doesn't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. What can you tell us about this stellar virus which is infecting the sun?
Yes, it's basically there is an alien life form, which is a single-celled microbe. It's not intelligent or anything like that, and it has we name it astrophage, which is Greek for a thing that eats stars. It's basically more like a mold, or like an algae that grows on the surface of stars, similar to how algae grows near the surface of our oceans. It grows on the surface of a star, and it spores itself. It collects a lot of energy, and it uses that energy to propel itself through interstellar distances to go seed itself to other stars. It's not intelligent. It doesn't have any sort of agenda or anything like that. It's just basically mold. Problem is, it breeds wildly, out of control. There's nothing to slow its population growth. So it's doubling its population at regular intervals, which means that after a while, our sun starts to dim. And it gets to the point where they realize Earth has about 30 years before the sun dims so much that life on Earth won't be able to survive anymore, because it's just not getting enough energy. And so that's the problem that we encounter, and that's the problem that we're trying to solve with the Hail Mary mission, which is basically they see that all the stars in our local cluster, in our neighborhood, just with astronomy, they can see that they are also dimming. So astrophage has also infected all of them, but not Tau Ceti, a star that's about 12 light years away, well within the area of all the infected stars. But for whatever reason, Tau Ceti itself isn't dimming at all. So they actually mount an interstellar mission using all the astrophage in our system as fuel to go find out what's going on at Tau Ceti and see if we can duplicate it back in our system.
So, Andy, you've already mentioned that this was a book that you obviously completed well before the pandemic happened. However, reading the book, there are obviously there's the clear parallel of a planet in peril, but also I thought it's a planet, all of these nation states pulling together. Now we have seen over the last year, the planet pulling together as far as developing a vaccine is concerned. The previous record for developing a vaccine from start to finish was 8 years for mumps, and they managed one for COVID-19 within months. Yeah. And so do you see a parallel there? And because obviously in your book, you have the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, all pulling together to try and find a solution to what is an existential crisis for planet Earth.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously no deliberate parallel because I finished the book before COVID. But I mean, you could say, well, yeah, there's some similarities between the book and what happened in the real world. But the reason for that is, I guess I could say that my high opinion of humanity is being validated a little bit during this COVID crisis. We are, working together reasonably well. Not perfect, we're not doing everything exactly right, but we are working together. And that's kind of a common theme in my books, is that humans are very good at collaboration and cooperation, especially when faced with a common threat.
So the listener, Andy, might be thinking, if this is such an international operation, how come it has an overtly Catholic title of Project Hail Mary? What's going on? How did they ever agree on that?
Funny you should ask that. At the time I wrote it, so I'm going to explain why it's called that. And the short answer is it's an American slang expression. The slightly longer answer is it's a slang expression that I thought was all throughout the English-speaking world, but I later discovered after the book was released that it's actually only used in the U.S. So to all of my other English-speaking readers, I thought you'd know this expression, so I'll explain it. In American football, not the proper British football, but American football, there's a clock, and when the time runs out, the game's over. And if you're behind and you're going to lose the game when the clock runs out, and this is the last play of the game, oftentimes they will do this very long pass. They'll just throw the football all the way down the field in a last-ditch, desperate attempt to score a touchdown before the clock runs out. And that it has a very, very low chance of success because you're hurling the ball like 100 yards and you're just hoping that one of your teammates will be there to catch it. And everybody just runs way downfield and does that. That play is called a Hail Mary pass and in American football slang. So it just means basically you're throwing the ball really hard and praying. That's why it's called a Hail Mary. So in Project Hail Mary, the name of the ship isn't about the Catholic prayer. It's about this last-ditch, desperate attempt to save the game. Of course, it's an American football expression, so I should have realized that it would be, not as well known outside the U.S., but I thought maybe other sports also used it. Oh, well.
Let me just check Matt, because Matt's a sports guy. That's what you spend a lot of time doing, Matt. Do you know this expression? Do you think it's known outside of American football?
I do know that expression, and I do. I'll be honest, I know it from movies. So I know, let's try a Hail Mary. I know I knew that from watching movies. I guess the equivalent in our football would be route one, wouldn't it? It would just be, let's go route one. We've got 2 minutes and we're trailing 1-0. Let's just go route one. Get it in the mixer, as we would say. So yeah, that's what Hail Mary means to me.
So the implication, Andy, is last chance saloon. The odds are stacked against you here.
When your goalkeeper runs up and starts playing offense, it's like that.
There you go. Route one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, I don't want to go too far into the story. But I always think, if you're talking about a movie, what's in the first reel is old-fashioned terminology, again, is okay. Can you tell us anything about who Ryland, once he's up there in space and he's kind of worked out what he's there for, who he communicates with? Can you tell us that?
So the story is told in two time frames. There's the present, where Ryland is aboard the spacecraft, and then there's flashbacks as his memory returns to him. I am a huge hypocrite. I just need to announce this now. I always tell writers, I tell everybody, don't use flashbacks. It's a cheesy way of telling a story. It's a lazy form of narration. You shouldn't do it. If you do it, you should feel bad. So anyway, this book is full of flashbacks. And the reason is because I couldn't really tell this story any other way without it being really odd. All the stuff that happens on Earth before the Hail Mary, that's the name of the ship, is launched, takes place over the course of 5 or 6 years. And the only relevant parts would require me to tell the story by skimming over time like a rock on a lake. It would just be like, okay, here's a scene. Then next thing you know, boom, next scene is like 2 years later. And it would just give the reader whiplash. And then once the ship is launched, you'd never see any of those characters ever again. Right. And so it would just be such a disjoint reading experience. So instead, by having it be flashbacks and an unfolding mystery, I get to exposition those earlier segments and hopefully not be a boring aside. Like, that's one thing I hate about flashbacks when I'm reading them is I'm really invested in the story. And then all of a sudden we're going to have a flashback to show how the main character met his wife or something. And it's like having your mom call you in to clean your room when you're out playing with your friends. You're like, I don't want to do this. So for the flashbacks, there's an unfolding mystery of exactly what astrophage is, how it works, how they built the Hail Mary, all the other things, how Ryland ended up on the mission. And to get back to Simon's actual question rather than my incoherent rambling, Ryland is he comes to remember that he was once in academia. He's a molecular biologist who specialized in speculative xenobiology. In other words, coming up with ideas on how alien life could exist. What other processes could lead to life that can reproduce in a complete second genesis unrelated to Earth. And he wrote a paper where he challenged the assumption that liquid water is necessary for life. And he was also really belligerent in that paper. He was saying everyone who thinks that water is required and that the Goldilocks zone exists is stupid, basically. And he basically got kind of ostracized from the scientific community. Then he went into being a middle school teacher. And he loved that. And so he was an unhappy person until he found his true calling of teaching. And then he really enjoyed that. Now, this causes him, with his amnesia, to say, like, how did I go from being a teacher to being an astronaut? Because I'm not an astronaut as far as I can tell. And so that's an unfolding mystery as well.
Yeah. But the question was actually...
Oh, dear. I think you'll find...
I mean, come on, Andy.
You can. That's all going to get cut, isn't it? Everything I just said.
Once he's actually out there, he's worked out a little bit about who he is. Who is it who he's communicating with? It's that bit.
Oh, you want to talk about what happens once he's there?
Yeah, but if that's too far, then you say back off.
Well, I don't want to say back off. It's a huge part of the book, but it is a major spoiler. So okay. I would advise all of you to, anyone listening who doesn't want a spoiler for the book, to just, stop now and come back and pick it up later. But, of course, listen to all the advertisements. I mean, you got to do
that. But the astrophage, which you've been talking about, is so fascinating. I mean, it's very much an Andy Weir kind of creation, it seems to me, coming at it from the outside. Did that arrive fully formed, Andy? Did that virus, that life form, the energy force, whatever you want to call it, had you always been wanting to write about something like this?
Not quite. I had in mind originally, well, for some time I've had this notion in my head of a fictional substance called black matter, is what I called it, which basically is a technology, like an alien technology that absorbs all electromagnetic radiation and turns it into mass in the form of black matter. And later you can turn black matter back into light by hitting it with an appropriate magnetic field or something. And then if you had that technology, you could have a spacecraft that could do interstellar travel. You going to Mars and back would be trivial. I mean, with a few 100 kilograms of fuel, you could do it easily. And so I was thinking about that. And I thought, okay, well, if I wanted to write a story where we have that technology, how do we get it? We're centuries away from, maybe more away from inventing anything like that. So I thought, well, what if it's an alien technology that we find? Well, then I got to explain where those advanced aliens are and why they're not around and stuff like that. Then I thought, well, this is interesting. Black matter is basically something that takes energy and makes more black matter. That sounds like life, right? I mean, that's what we do. We take energy and make people out of it. So I thought, okay, what if instead of this highly advanced alien technology, what if it's a naturally evolved life form? And that's where I started coming up with the idea of astrophage as it is in the book. And then I got to thinking, oh, let's see, we got a hold of some of this, and then we could start farming it, using it for interplanetary travel and fun stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, right. But of course, we'd have to be real careful not to let any of it get into our sun, because that'd be a disaster. And it's like a couple of beats go by, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the book. That's the book. Of course, it gets into the sun, and that is the disaster, and they have to stave it off, and there we go.
It is, and it's part of that really makes the book work, Andy. And as Simon's already said, this is clearly an Andy Weir creation, because I was a big fan of The Martian. Of course, we interviewed you for Artemis as well. I'm going to make a comparison. You'll have done tons of interviews, I don't doubt, to promote this book. I'm going to make a comparison that I will place all the money in my pocket you've not had a question about so far. All right. And that is, I'm going to compare this to, and I can spot a TARDIS just over your left shoulder.
Right there?
So yes, there you go.
Your listeners can't see it, but yes, I do have a TARDIS. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan.
Okay, so the comparison I'm going to make is to a British TV show, but it's not a sci-fi show. It's a show that has been huge over here, particularly in the last few weeks, and that is a show called Line of Duty. Now, that obviously has nothing to do with sci-fi. Okay, so you know Line of Duty, that's good. Line of Duty deals with police corruption and also does not pander to the audience at all. In other words, it uses quite a lot of acronyms that you really need to be on your toes with, like OCG and Cheers and things like that. So you cannot drop your attention for a moment, because you won't know what's going on. And that essence of Line of Duty I see in your book as well, in that you are going to have to pay attention, and bluntly there is going to be elements of science that you're going to need to you're going to find yourself following along with, but it's going to take a little bit of effort on your part. The reason why you're prepared to invest that effort is because of the characters and, bluntly, the humor that runs like through a stick of rock through your books.
Well, thank you. Hopefully it's not too much work for people to follow the science. That's like the biggest challenge in my particular style of writing is, okay, I've got a bunch of science that I need to explain to the reader. I try to say, like, okay, I just want to explain the minimum amount of science so that they can understand the plot events that are happening. And it has to not read like a Wikipedia article, right? It has to be entertaining and come out organically if possible. And and as you say, I've discovered that humor is the top secret thing that only me and a million other authors know, that the reader will forgive you any amount of exposition if you make it funny.
That balance, Andy, between plot and science, do you have a conversation with your editor where your editor says, back off here, we could do with some more there? Or do you just write the science the way you want to write it?
Well, a bit of both, I'd say. I mean, on my first draft, I just write it the way I want to write it. I'm very conscious of, like, okay, don't drone on and bore the reader to tears. Even though it's interesting to you, doesn't mean it's interesting to them. And my editor absolutely will say, like, I mean, it's not in lots of places. Usually I get a reasonably good balance, at least as far as my editor's concerned. But he will definitely say, like, okay, you went on a bit long in this description here, maybe tighten it up. And over here, this other thing, I still didn't understand it. So maybe you could change your wording or something, make it a little more clear how this works.
Am I right in saying that the movie rights are gone? Ryan Gosling is positioning himself to be, that makes him sound greedy. I didn't mean that.
That's sneaky Ryan Gosling.
Dastardly.
Ryan
Gosling. Because I would have thought after watching First Man, he'd had it with space. You know, he clearly wasn't having a good time on Apollo 11. So, but is all of that true, Andy?
Yes, so the film rights have been sold to MGM, and they bought them outright, which is nice for me. It implies that they're taking it more seriously than a typical film project, which is nice, because you never know with Hollywood. You just have to cross your fingers and hope they greenlight it. Ryan Gosling is attached to play Ryland Grace, which is awesome because they have the same initials. Maybe he can bring his cufflinks to set. I don't know. And then we have Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the directing duo. They're set to direct. And we have Drew Goddard working on the screenplay right now. And Drew Goddard is the very talented writer who did the adaptation of The Martian. So we like him. So things are humming along nicely. We have ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, working on designs for Rocky, which is a character in the story. That'll be very interesting. We can just hope that it gets greenlighted. And as for Ryan, he's very excited about the idea of being able to play a character that actually shows emotions. Lately, he's been cast in a bunch of things where his primary acting note is, stop showing emotion, where he's like, Neil Armstrong was a famously stoic man. And so in playing him, I think Ryan did a fantastic job, but Neil Armstrong himself is very stoic, didn't show emotion very much. And also, before that, he was in the Blade Runner movie where he's like, never shows emotion because that's his character and so on. So this time he gets to actually be an emotional guy and have highs and lows and ups and downs. And I think he's looking forward to it.
Yeah. Can I just ask you a bit more about optimism? Because, Matt's already mentioned it and you've been talking about it, and maybe in terms of vaccines and international cooperation and so on. But a lot of sci-fi has often been quite bleak and nihilistic. But I wonder if there is, some, I don't know where, maybe you're an optimistic person anyway, Andy, I don't know, but this book and your others, and maybe it's the humor, they just feel as though there's a sense of positivity, which others might not feel inclined to include.
I think that's definitely fair. I don't walk around all day, skipping through the tulips and stuff like that. But I do have a fairly high opinion of humanity as a whole. I think we're a very good, very cooperative species, and we're good at working together. If somebody breaks their leg and a total stranger helps them get to a hospital, that doesn't even make the news because it's just assumed human behavior. If they don't help, then that's newsworthy. So that's just how cooperative we are at our core. So yeah, I'm optimistic about humanity. I also think that I'm a little annoyed that sci-fi has kind of been hijacked by these bleak dystopian misery-scapes of fascist governments that are only teenagers doing weird stuff can seem to topple. And I don't know. I don't like dystopia.
So when you look at the billionaires who are dominating the space race in America, does that still make you optimistic?
Well, yeah, because they're billionaires dominating the space race rather than just billionaires hoarding money and chilling at home. Like you got Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and stuff. They're sinking money into trying to make space travel happen. They don't have to do that. Musk could concentrate on Tesla, which makes a bunch of money. And I think Bezos is doing just fine with Amazon. Neither of them have to do this. This is like following a dream of advancing us into the space age. I think that's awesome.
I was reading an interview with you at the weekend, Andy, and you have this theory, and I'm wondering if you can just give it to our listeners, because I found it encouraging. So we've all had a terrible year. It's been, extraordinary. But you think, I certainly read that you said that this will be the last pandemic that the world ever faces.
That's right. That's my prediction. I think COVID-19 is humanity's last true pandemic, because just the technology that we've developed to fight COVID-19 alone will stop the next would-be pandemic in its tracks. It's no longer the case where it'll take months and months or years to develop a vaccine. It'll take now with mRNA technology that it takes weeks. That's it. So imagine if we had functional, viable vaccines for COVID-19 back in January of 2020. the pandemic wouldn't have gotten anywhere near to what it is now. And people would get vaccinated faster than it could spread, and there would be no pandemic. It would just be a disease that we nipped in the bud. And so I think it's amazing. People don't really understand the magnitude of what happened in the scientific community in response to COVID. It's not just, they got good at making a vaccine. The medical community invented a new technology of vaccine generation to combat COVID-19, and it worked. It's amazing. It's like it's just incredible. It's as big a level of invention as antibiotics were back when they were first invented. I mean, it's that level. And now also we have a few other things going for us. I believe that within 50 years, 60 years, our technology will be so good that we can probably just make an antidote or a vaccine for any virus we get. I think that we'll be nearly perfect at that within a few decades. And so the only time that a pandemic really has a chance to hop in there and get its damage in would be in those next 50 years. And now all of us in the world have a pandemic under our belts. It's in living memory. We know how to act. We know what to do. We wouldn't be as sloppy or as disorganized as we were this time. And even though, and I'm not saying we were that disorganized, we're not perfect, but boy, we responded to it well, in my opinion. So I think that the combination of a pandemic being in living memory for the next 50 years, plus the advancements we're going to see in medical technology over the next 50 years, means that COVID-19 is the last hurrah for pandemics in the human population.
Unless one comes from space.
Well, yes, astrophage doesn't infect humans.
So everything will be fine. Andy, do you know what you're going to be working on next? Do you have ideas that happen all the time and you compartmentalize them and get to work on them once you've finished? Or do you run a bunch of projects all at the same time?
I tend to meander from one project to another until one of them really starts grabbing me, and then I write that. So I don't talk about what I'm working on until I'm sure it's going to be my next book, and I'm not at that stage yet. But I have 3 or 4 things that I'm working on. Generally, what I'll do is I'll write chapter 1 of each idea, see how it feels, and then kind of think about what the long-term plot lines are for them and so on. It's the process of development. I don't just get struck by lightning with a wonderful idea that I just write to fruition. I have to kiss a lot of frogs before I find my prince.
Andy Weir's latest book is Project Hail Mary. It's a terrific read. There'll be more with Andy on this podcast. Where he's going to do our Q&A, which will be available as well. But for the moment, Andy, thank you very much. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thanks so much for having me.